And you have arguably the most powerful conference in the sport trying to decide, all right, are they going to punish their own schools? And no one really knows how this is going to end. The lawyers don't know. The conference commissioners certainly don't know. The guys on the rosters absolutely have no idea. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Happy to have you here with us. It is week 0, and we're not going to spend a lot of time in the open. We're not going to spend a lot of time in the close. We have too much to get to, so we're going to fly through it. Quarterbacks are being named all over the country. Offensive line continues to be a massive, massive question mark for legitimate national championship contenders. We've heard it at Ohio State. We've heard it in Stillwater with Eric Morris. We're going to hit both those teams today. We also are going to go through the quarterback situations, why these guys were named, and what it means for the future prospects on some of those teams. Subscribe to the podcast. We are in season now. It's in season mode. So I need you to be with us each and every week. We're going to move to 3 episodes a week here very soon. 4 episodes when the season actually gets going, because we do 2 on Sundays. So a lot to look forward to. And this will be your destination for the best college football conversations for the next few months. Subscribe on the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and go ahead and check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. There'll be some team-specific cut-ups out there as well. So let's not waste any time. All right, we got brand new quarterbacks all over the place. We got offensive line issues all over the place. We got some star players. We have some eligibility conversations that have been big. So let's dive in. Let's have some fun, and let's get to work. We'll start with what is going on when it comes to eligibility, and why are some of these guys able to play in some places and not in others. On Friday morning, you had a couple judges in Denver that decided to change how rosters were going to look throughout the entire college football world. So here's what happened. I want to keep the legal part short because the football part is where it gets a little interesting. A federal judge in Colorado had issued an injunction. It covered a whole class of athletes that started playing college football in 2022. They could play up to 4 years under the old rules. And then the NCAA changed their system in June to allow you to play 5 seasons inside of 5 years, but they did not make it retroactive. Now, the non-retroactivity is the entire fight. And on Friday, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, because the NCAA appealed the ruling in Colorado, they stayed that injunction 2-1. And the NCAA's chief legal officer said that Division I goes back to the way it was before the district court got involved, and it's effective immediately. So thousands of players who woke up on Friday thinking they had an extra season went to bed without that extra year. But the appeal expedited, so it's not over, and I want to be careful. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that anyone's season is done right now, because I don't know that, and neither does anybody else. But here's what it looks like as of this morning. In Bloomington, for example, you got Stephen Daly and Kellen Wyatt that can practice but currently can't play. People who cover that team every day, they think they might get back at some point. Those are 2 difference-making defensive ends, and we'll see if they're right. I don't know. We'll see. Because it's genuinely fascinating, because across the board, there's a bunch of different question marks, and it's being decided at the state level. So, for example, in Louisiana, you had 16 players that filed in Louisiana. All 16 of those players are currently eligible. So while Indiana, those 2 guys that might be a huge difference along their defensive line, they are not capable of going. LSU is actively adding guys. So Junior Tui Alamaka, he's now at Baton Rouge. He's a 5th-year edge rusher, played over 1,000 career snaps at Notre Dame. And the big one is Daquan Wright, who was a tight end last year for Ole Miss, caught 39 balls for over 630 yards, went undrafted, signed with the Browns, played in the preseason, likely going to get waived. And if he gets through waivers, then he could go back to college and play for Lane Kiffin, who he played for at Ole Miss. So think about that. A guy that is currently in the NFL could return to potentially play college football. And it's legal, all because a judge in Louisiana said so. And there's places popping up. There's one in Kentucky and the Carolinas. Like there's different interpretations all over the place. So here's what's so interesting, because there is a third version of this. And here's what almost no one's really talking about. the restraining order restrains the NCAA and all persons acting in concert or participation with it. Well, the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, they're acting in concert with the NCAA on the pro contract rule. Same with the ghost transfer rule. But the SEC has a rule of its own that the NCAA does not have and that no other league has right now, is that you cannot transfer from one SEC school to another SEC school if you didn't enter the first portal window of the offseason. Now, the league passed this way back when the spring portal existed to keep player movement inside the conference from December to January, right? They didn't want it in May. So the spring portal disappeared a while ago, and this rule is still in the books, and it has never really been challenged in court because it's never really needed to be. So you look at what we just talked about. We talked about Tui Alamaka coming from Notre Dame to LSU. The SEC has no standing there. Jack Pyburn is also a plaintiff. He's currently on a roster in the NFL. He played at LSU last year. So if he gets cut and goes back, then the SEC doesn't have any standing there either because he'd be going back to LSU potentially. And then Daquan Wright, that's the big difference. He played his football at Ole Miss last season and is going to transfer potentially to LSU. And that's the one. That is an SEC school in Ole Miss that is losing a player to another SEC school in LSU. And it's the only rule in this entire mess. It's only in the SEC, right? So it's not necessarily the NCAA, which means the SEC might have to decide whether it's this week or at some point in the future. Are they willing to do something or threaten something against one of their own schools? And Greg Sankey has said something for the last few months that I keep coming back to. And they had talked for a while about the SEC potentially just writing a bigger rule book that is only for SEC schools. And he said the people have to want to be governed. Well, that's the whole thing right there. So the conferences have a plan B potentially where they can maybe make some adjustments. And it's exactly this, right? And if Congress never passes anything, then the SEC and the Big Ten, they can write and enforce their own eligibility and compensation rules. So LSU is kind of the first real test right now. And there's a bit of a template where it could maybe get a little bit ugly, right? I mean, earlier this month, for example, the Patriot League told Villanova that it would have to forfeit any game that its quarterback played in because he'd won an injunction against the NCAA but never sued the Patriot League. So a conference told a member school, play him and you're in trouble. Well, is the SEC going to say that to LSU? And if it does, is LSU going to be governed? Or does LSU potentially fight this? That's what's going to be so fascinating about this entire move. Because if the SEC doesn't do anything, for example, then there's really no hope of enforcing anything else that it gets right, that it tries to write in the future, because the school essentially just said, no, we're playing them, do something about it. And there's going to be attorneys involved. There's going to be a lot of people that are looking at it. There's even an attorney that's saying, well, his last team that he played for wasn't Ole Miss. It was actually the Cleveland Browns. So it's not really an SEC to SEC transfer whatsoever. It's a AFC North to SEC transfer, right? So I'd love to have someone explain this to me. I'd love to have someone walk me through what this is all about, because for some schools, we're just 5 days away from kickoff. Right? Indiana is without two guys they thought they might have. LSU just gained two that no one thought they were going to get. You have contingency plans all over the place. And you have arguably the most powerful conference in the sport trying to decide, all right, are they going to punish their own schools? And no one really knows how this is going to end. The lawyers don't know. The conference commissioners certainly don't know. The guys on the rosters absolutely have no idea. But we do know is that there's a game that's kicking off in Dublin, Ireland this weekend, and games are going to start anyways. So from here on out, I'm going to focus on the practice field, but I wanted to first give you the latest update when it came to the eligibility saga, because we have not seen the end of this. It's probably only going to get a little messier before we get some clarity on where things go. Time now for some Camp Confidential. We've done this over the last couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun. Here's what we're hearing in fall camp, and we're going to do a bunch of schools today. We have 12 schools that we will get to today. We've done 8 in the previous 2 shows, so we better move fast. Let's start with the defending national champs. It's the Indiana Hoosiers. And the first thing I'm hearing out of Bloomington It's that the offensive line is losing to the defensive line almost every single day, and everyone's fired up about that, right? Look, we know Carter Smith is Indiana's left tackle. We know he's the real deal. He says that he feels strong, that he's been in a great spot. Does have to wear an arm brace in practice, but it doesn't matter. They asked him specifically about the guys he's lining up against, and he said there's some of the most explosive players he's ever gone against. That's a pretty good thing. If your all-American left tackle is saying these guys that I'm having to block every day they're a real problem, well, imagine what that's going to be like for a normal tackle that they're going to see week in and week out. You're hearing about Tyreek Tucker, who along that defensive line, they said that his group is really coming together and that they're getting better every day. And they continue to raise each other's standard. The offensive line raises theirs, the defensive line raises theirs. So two units that are publicly crediting each other in the third week of August is great. And you hear about this personnel on the D-line, man, I don't think they've missed a beat. I really don't think they have. You look at Chidi Obiaser, who's the other one. He's a great transfer player. Toby Osunsanmi, who's coming up with Obiaser, who's from Kansas State. These guys looking like things are going to be pretty good. So it sounds like on the whole group, they get their waves of defensive linemen at these teams. So that's great. The other thing I'm hearing about is Josh Hoover. And I want to be straight with you when I talk to you about this, because people are watching him every day and they tell you, well, there have been maybe a couple inconsistencies on the deep ball. And that's fine, right? That's not necessarily what he needs to be right now. Quick game, decision-making, run-pass options, getting the ball out before you hit that back step. That's where he's been excellent. So it sounds like his grasp of the offense is great. And it sounds like his accuracy might have started here, maybe a little bit on the lower end, and it has progressively improved as he's developed more chemistry with the wide receivers. Says that they've really noticed a difference. So that's big, right? Talk to about the rapport that's being created with Nick Marsh, the Michigan State transfer. Sounds like they're hitting things in the back of the end zone. Ball's at like the 10-yard line. He's dropping it back on a double move, and it's perfect, right? So it's perfect. So he can throw it over guys and under guys. His comfort level is getting exactly where it needs to go. I mean, this guy's played a lot of football. I mean, he's started 31 college football games. So you expect him to, those deep balls, they're going to come. I'm not worried about it. But if the operation has been as smooth as they say it's been, this offense might not skip a beat. And the other thing I'm hearing is that there are some rooms that are really sorting themselves out, particularly at tight end. Sounds like Andrew Barker's kind of separating at that spot. He's been doing a great job blocking, which is significant. You also heard that Cincinnati transfer Quan Sanks. He's done a great job the last couple of weeks there in the back end. And people are saying maybe the secondary and the safety spots maybe a little bit underrated, which is pretty encouraging, which says an awful lot. So you put all three of these things together to identify where Indiana's at. You got a very deep defensive front that can rotate in waves against you. You have a quarterback that's getting the ball out really quickly and is being really decisive, even though the deep ball accuracy is still a work in progress. And you have some role players that are locking down some significant spots, specifically the blocking tight end, which was a really important piece of this offense last year, because we know this team's going to play physical. So if you have that job locked down, you got to feel pretty good about it, because they might have to win some ugly games. That's how you win sometimes in November in the Big Ten. But I'm very excited about what could come for Indiana. And look, we'll keep an eye on what the eligibility conversation means for their two defensive ends, because they already are one of the better defenses in America. But if those two guys get back, then they're top 5, top 3 unit across the board, more than likely. Let's move next to the Alabama Crimson Tide. And we've now heard that Keelon Russell has won the job. And part of why he won the job is probably something that you would maybe overlook. His second and final scrimmage, he took the first snap. And in the first scrimmage there for the Crimson Tide, Keelon Russell made some real wow plays. His mobility was obvious. We know he's athletic. We know he can extend plays and make plays off schedule. But it sounds like as he drops back, does make a pick, whatnot. It's not like he's going to be perfect. He's still a young player, and he's going to be things he tries in scrimmages that he might not try in the game. But people in the building will tell you that he makes plays. He just makes plays. So while what's amazing is that Austin Mack, you listen to people, is like he had a really good camp. I was told he had a really, really good camp. It's just Keelon Russell wouldn't be denied. He just went out there and he took it. And that he just continued to make big play after big play after big play. Yeah, there'd be a mistake maybe sprinkled in there, but that's to be expected. You have a redshirt freshman, but the reason why he won the job is because he scares you to death on every single snap. And it's pretty amazing that the team's been reacting differently to him. Like there's always this hope, there's this glow about how Keelon Russell impacts his team and how when he extends plays, you might not have to cover just one route. You might have to cover two, maybe even three, all in one play sequence. So, and Austin Mack's a guy they have a ton of faith in. I was told that he could be an all SEC type of player. Austin Mack could be an all SEC type of player. But Keelon Russell will be an all SEC type of player. That's pretty amazing, right? So they have two good quarterbacks there in Tuscaloosa, but the guy with the highest ceiling ended up winning it because of the wow plays that he made throughout the entire fall camp. And especially since that first scrimmage, he's been on a moonshot over the last 5 or 6 practices, which resulted in him being named the starting quarterback. The second thing I'm hearing is that the running back that was recruited as somewhat of an afterthought for many is finding a lot of opportunities with the first team. Look, A.K. Deere was having a great camp. He hurt his ankle in the first scrimmage, so he's going to start the season on the sideline. E.J. Crowell, who's the 5-star freshman that everyone thought, oh, he's the next one. Well, he missed both scrimmages. So it's opened up the door for Trayshawn Brown, and he has not done anything to take a backseat to anyone. He got plenty of first-team work in the second scrimmage, made a ton of plays as a runner, made a ton of plays as a wide receiver. People are describing him as quote-unquote special. And that says an awful lot. And the one thing I'm always curious about with the true freshman, right? How does he protect? As a quarterback, I need to know that my young running back will stick his nose in there and protect a blitzing linebacker. And Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, went out of his way to praise how he has performed in pass protection. So we'll see how things go for him. But this is a freshman that's going to find his way on the field and will probably make some massive plays for the Tide early in this football season. The other thing I'm hearing is that the offensive line's still a bit of a work in progress. Right tackle, they're starting to solidify that for the most part, but it's still a battle between Nick Brooks and Javen James, and it's going to be going back and forth. It wouldn't even surprise me if both those guys end up playing quite a bit. Left guard is also open. Mal Waldrop against William Sanders. And Sanders did miss some of the spring to an injury, which allowed Waldrop to take a lot of the first team snaps, and he's done a really good job. So not a lot of people expected him to win that left guard spot, but he might very well be the guy to beat for that position. And then Rayson Delgatti, he's locking things down there at the center spot as well. So you put all those things side by side, and you look at where this could take Alabama. Look, they're handing the offense to a redshirt freshman with 15 career pass attempts, right? But the defining trait is that a play is never dead when he's on the field and that he can make the miraculous play. There might be a mistake or two filled in, but guess what? That's playing ball. That happens. You also might be relying on a true freshman running back with 0 career college carries, but they feel really good about what they have. That is a really good thing to be. And it sounds like the offensive line, regardless of how those spots settle up at left guard and at right tackle, they feel like they have a chance to come together in pretty spectacular fashion offensively as the season goes along. So that's encouraging. Granted, East Carolina week 1, Kentucky week 2, Florida State week 3. So it'll ramp up, and it'll ramp up in a hurry very, very quickly. But the quarterback is determined. The running back room is still shaking out, and the offensive line is still shaking out. We know the defense at all 3 levels is very good. This Alabama team is going to be a good one come September. The Ohio State Buckeyes. And the first thing we're hearing out of Columbus is exactly where Ryan Day needs to be, and it's really the offensive line, right? Now, he even mentioned it. We talked about it last week. I wanted to know the offensive line by practice 9 or 10. Well, practice 9 came, and it went. Camp finished as well. And the projection right now is that Ian Moore will be at left tackle, Luke Montgomery at left guard, Carson Hinsman will be at center, and then Austin Saraveld will be at right guard with Phillip Daniels at right tackle. Now, we've got to be precise here because who knows exactly what it's ultimately going to be, because no one's really going to confirm a starting 5 right now. It's more of a projection, if you will. It's certainly not a depth chart. But here's what I love is that Saraveld missed a little bit of time there in the middle of fall camp, But he's the biggest piece here because he was a left tackle last year. If you can somehow find a way for him to be on the interior, that means that somebody stepped up at tackle, which could be huge because Saravel being able to play multiple spots is really important, but he might be your very best guy. So him coming back, getting a bulk of his reps at right guard, sounds like Moore now being pushed out to left tackle. Things might be settling in a spot where you feel pretty good because you actually heard coming out of the second scrimmage, sounds like the offensive line was a standout unit. And we know just how good Ohio State's defensive front will be. So that's a good development there in Columbus. The other thing we're hearing is a guy named Jay Timmons. He is a true freshman corner. He's starting to take first team reps at nickel and not necessarily in a walkthrough, right? I mean, he's up there with the first team defense going against one of the best offenses in America every single day. And he's holding off Terry Moore, who transferred from Duke. And we thought he was going to be the guy there in the back end, or at least at the nickel spot early on for the Buckeyes. So no one really saw this coming right now, but this is a good development. They have quality depth and they have a true freshman that's popping right now at a very important spot in their defense. And it's also sounding like the entire back seven is going to be a lot better than what people expected. I think a lot of people thought it'd be good. I think now people are starting to be open to the idea that it could be elite, right? Sounds like Earl Little thought maybe he would slide in at nickel. Well, he's going to be at safety and kind of play that do-it-all role that we saw last year that was run very effectively by Caleb Downs. Now, will he be Caleb Downs? Probably not. It's asking a lot, but sounds like he's looking very, very comfortable. And then you have some other guys that are stepping up as well. Some youth that is emerging. Sounds like Jalen McClain has had a really strong day as well. You have some transfers who have maybe had some quiet months, but they're now starting to lose their black stripes as well. So you're excited about where things might be heading for the back end overall, given they are replacing 8 or 7 defensive starters from a year ago. So when you got a true freshman that's capable of playing and giving you good reps there early in his career, you got a safety that maybe he wasn't projected to play there, but is actually looking very comfortable at that spot. A couple other guys that are taking their stripes off. Sounds like things are moving in the right direction too. And they hit an advantage too, because we know this offense can score. We know Julian Sayin and Jeremiah Smith are going to get theirs. We know these wide receivers are going to get theirs. But if this defense is continuing to play up to a very high level, then you're in a really good spot too. Because you got Ball State week 1, then you go to Austin on week 2. So this young secondary, right? You got 19 days to be put in the best position possible. But it sounds like the offensive line is solidifying, the skill is going to be great, and the defense is coming together and should be in a really good spot here at some point in the very near future. Let's go next to another OSU. This time it's Oklahoma State. Now, first thing we're hearing out of Stillwater is that Eric Morris is in the same spot as Ryan Day was in, right? Going back to the spring game, Morris told everybody he wanted to know who his starting offensive line was going to be by the time the first fall scrimmage rolled around. He said again on the first day of fall camp. And they said they felt pretty good about maybe 7 or 8 of their guys, but they wanted to kind of set it in stone. It's not there just yet. And then the scrimmage happened. And what came out was we're getting close, but we're not there just yet. So they got a bunch of offensive linemen on this roster, 20 to be exact, coming off a season that was about as disappointing as it can possibly get. But it sounds like they have a quality left tackle in Jacob Sexton. Sounds like they have a really good guy at center as well. You got a Portland State transfer coming in as well. So it sounds like maybe things are coming together, just not quite there just yet, but arrow pointing up along the Pokes offensive line. They also, that Eric Morris runs the air raid, right? And he said that in media day, I believe, he said if Mike Leach looked at the script, he would be very disappointed with what he sees. Why? Too much running. Way too many run plays called for Eric Morris. Look, they want to kind of force themselves on the opponent by running the ball. Look, we know Mestamaker. We know the pass game is going to be good. But the way you finish at the Power 4 level is by running the football. That's how you finish it, right? And that's how you win games too, by stopping the run on the other side. So we know that they're building around the quarterback. That's to be expected. But it's Caleb Hawkins that feels like he could be a massive difference maker. He's a big-time transfer, but kind of flown under the radar. When you talk about all that is Oklahoma State, so much of the attention has been on the quarterback. So much of the attention has been on the passing attack and how many yards they threw for last year. Under the radar, though, was the addition of Caleb Hawkins, who is going to be carrying the load and is going to have a big year. He's gained some weight. He's gotten stronger. And now it's looking like he's going to transition beautifully from North Texas to the Big 12. The other thing is that this has been a really hard camp by all accounts. If you listen to what people have said that have watched it, they're like, dude, guys are gasping for wind. That they were pushing these guys in ways that you wouldn't believe. They said that they looked at the GPS data and it's like, whoa, these guys are getting after it. So the team has responded really, really well. I mean, you got 87 new players, 20 of them coming up from North Texas. Everyone knows what Drew Mestamaker's capable of. He threw for almost 4,400 yards last year. Plus Hawkins, we talked about him. Plus Wyatt Young. So you got a bunch of guys that were somewhat under-recruited out of high school. Well, now this roster that struggled maybe early in camp, being asked to play a very physical brand of football, a run-first version of a passing offense. And the offensive line's still coming together, and there's a lot to install in a 4-week period. But it sounds like things are looking pretty good for Oklahoma State so far. And look, the schedule's tough. Like, we understand the schedule, and they will open things up against Tulsa there on September 5th. So looking forward to seeing what the Pokes look like under Eric Morris this year. We'll keep it in the Big 12. We'll go next to Kansas State. And the first thing I'm hearing out of Manhattan is a number, and the number is 5. All right? With all due respect to Jaden Daniels, the number is 5. All right, Kansas State was already replacing 4 offensive line starters on a group that wasn't great last year. Then you had John Pastore, who was the incumbent left tackle. He got hurt in camp. Sounds like he's not going to be available. And then George Fitzpatrick, the other candidate at the spot, shut down. So, like, you have to replace everybody up front, right? You thought the guy was going to be the starter at center. Well, he's now running with the 2s and the 3s. You got guys that have been banged up throughout fall camp, so it's not great. Now, they have solidified a couple spots along the offensive line, but you have a lot of unknowns along that offensive line for Kansas State. The other thing I'm hearing right now, and the answer might be 18 years old, right? And Oliver Miller has been one of the most talked about guys in camp. He's a true freshman out of Colorado. He's recruited by a lot of big-time programs. Ohio State was on him, and he decided to stay and go to Kansas State. And the line on him, people watching every day, is that the freshman, he is one of the furthest along right now. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to necessarily guaranteed to start, but with so much new, with so much movement, you might be looking at some youth up front. That should be a challenge, especially knowing what the expectations might be for Kansas State this year. And the third thing you're hearing is that the rest of the roster got quite a bit bigger. And Cullen Klein brought in a new strength coach, and they are carrying real mass this year. And it sounds like a guy like Garrett Oakley, for example, people in the building and the NFL scouts who have watched August practices are gushing about how much bigger, how much more put together the group is as a whole. Sounds like Garrett Oakley at tight end and Coy Beasley and these other guys that are playing a really high level, but they more look the part, right? And Jay Harris, you got a newcomer running back. He's 225. So it sounds like this is going to be a bigger, more physical version of Kansas State. At least that's the goal here in the near term for what is hopefully going to be a bounce-back season for K-State. Look, the honest read, look, you got a veteran quarterback, 3rd year as a full-time starter in Avery Johnson. You know he's going to do a great job. So the tools have never really been the question for him. Like, he's got everything that you could possibly want, but now it's time to kind of get all of that out, right? But he's going to have a bunch of new around him. So the entire season comes down to a few things. One, can the offensive line come together? Because if it doesn't hold up, then nothing else matters. I mean, the quarterback running for his life is not great. But if that offensive line can come together, and that starting 5 ends up playing good football, then Kansas State could be a bit of a sleeper there in the Big 12. On now to the Tennessee Volunteers, and the first thing you hear is that a true freshman just won the job, right? Faizon Brandon is officially Tennessee's starting quarterback, and he was the more productive of the 2 in the first scrimmage, and then was the more productive of the 2 in the second. And by all accounts, by the end of it, it wasn't particularly close. Now, it wasn't flawless by any stretch. You want to be fair about that. He's facing a lot of pressures and different looks from Jim Knowles. And at times, maybe he wasn't quite patient enough with his protection, but it doesn't really matter because he's got legs, right? If you listen to those that have watched Brandon closely, He would have led the team in rushing on Saturday if he had not been wearing a red non-contact jersey. So that's the trait. And George McIntyre, if you listen to what people have said that, like, he had a pretty good fall camp, actually a very good fall camp. But he just didn't quite make the plays that Faizon Brandon had made consistently. So the upside of Brandon, the mobility of Brandon, and remember, this is in a non-contact red jersey. Once you get a 220-plus pound quarterback out there, he's not tackled with a two-hand touch. So his best might actually be in front of him. But there will be occasional mistakes. He's a young player, still very optimistic about the long-term upside. And we've talked a little bit about the loss of Idris Farouk. He's out for the season. He's going to be a starting safety. But people have said that the back end of the defense has already been very, very good in his absence. That was something I was concerned about. Sounds like TJ Metcalf has been really consistent and has kind of taken over as the leader in that room. You got DeJuan Lane, who's kind of slid into the starting job and was visibly better in the second scrimmage than he was in the first. And in that scrimmage inside Neyland, both those guys intercepted a pass. So up front, you also are hearing the name Tyree Weathersby, and people are saying one of the best scrimmages of his career just this past weekend. Xavier Gilliam, which sounds like he's been one of their best defensive linemen up front, so that's big as well. So a couple of newcomers, and the back end solidified even in the absence of what might have been a difference maker in Farouk. The other thing I'm hearing is that we know that the run game with Deshaun Bishop, that's going to be Faizon Brandon's best friend. And he went for over 1,000 yards last year. But we know what he is, right? We're good on Deshaun Bishop. We feel great about him. The other guy we're hearing about is Javen Gordon, who's a transfer from Tulane, was good in the spring and has been very consistent in camp. He's doing a great job on the perimeter, between the tackles, done a good job in the passing game as well. Dwayne Morris has ripped off a couple long runs as well. So the run game so far has been the most consistent part of the offense for 3 straight weeks. So we'll pay a ton of attention to the quarterback. Let's not forget what Tennessee does and does very well. That's run the football under Josh Heupel. So you put all those things together. You got a young quarterback whose best trait right now is his mobility and his playmaking ability. You got a defense that sounds like it's improved greatly over the last week. You got a really deep running back room. Maybe you need to hand it off 30 times a game. That's fine. And it's fine if they're not a passing attack. If they want to run it, run it. They want to throw it, throw it. They want to play great defense, play great defense. I'm very encouraged by what I've heard about the progress made with the run game, the offensive line, and the continuity and the depth that they have at running back as well. The one thing we did here, there's a few too many penalties on Saturday, a couple holds, a couple pre-snap mistakes. So you do not want to be a penalty-ridden group, because that was not who they were last year, because asking a freshman to play behind the sticks is not ideal. So if they can just clean that up, that will be helpful. Of course, Furman will be week 1. Then the second career start is a road game at Georgia Tech. So very exciting news out of Knoxville, Tennessee, with them naming Faizon Brandon as their starting quarterback. The Florida Gators, they have also named a starting quarterback. I want to start, however, though, with the offensive line, because what have we talked about with Florida? We didn't say a word. We thought the quarterback would be just fine. Whoever the quarterback is, they'll be fine. The biggest thing that could get Florida got this year was going to be the O-line. And the second and final scrimmage, Saturday night in the Swamp, you listen to a lot of people that went and watched it. Sounds like the offensive line actually beat the defensive line, and it wasn't just the first group. The second group did so as well. Sounds like they got really good push. Sounds like they ran the football with a lot more success than they did in the first scrimmage. And the illustration was great. I mean, you hear about a redshirt freshman named Duke Clark who started the scrimmage with the second team, scored a couple touchdowns. And the first thing you hear is that the holes were massive, which is great. Now, is it an indicator maybe the D-line's not what we thought? Perhaps. But if the biggest question has been about the offensive line, and the second team offensive line is making a huge hole in the second team's defensive front, well, that's good, because that was the biggest question mark we had. Now, we also know that Aaron Philo has been named the starting quarterback. And in the last week, he started to separate himself. Sounds like in the first scrimmage, maybe a little bit up and down. Second scrimmage, sounded like he was much more consistent. And while Tramell Jones does have a lot of talent, does have arm talent, can really rip the football, sounds like he's had maybe a couple questionable throws. And sounds like both kind of had their moments. and they weren't sure early in camp who was going to separate, but it eventually became Philo. And ironically, he started the Saturday scrimmage with the twos. So Summerall was named the starter on Monday. Well, the final scrimmage, he didn't take the first snap, which is fine. Like, you want to give these guys an equal chance. But Jones did throw a pick. So I am encouraged, though. I'm very encouraged. Philo has been a guy that this staff circled coming out of the portal. Buster Faulkner, the offensive coordinator, brought him with him from Georgia Tech. So you kind of knew what you were going to get with Philo. And it sounds like the last couple of days, there's been a little bit more of a separation. It's also sounding like a lot of young players are making a lot of plays. We talked about Duke Clark a moment ago. Sounds like Hayes Kent is a true freshman. He might have the best ball skills on the team. And he went up, caught some big-time plays. Sounds like Anthony Rubio is another guy. So there's some young guys that maybe we don't know as much about that are starting to pop. And they also let former players into the scrimmage. A few people that played, a while back or whatnot. And they were talking about the physicality that you're seeing from this defense, that the linebackers in particular are hitting guys hard. And that's something they're very excited to see. So you put all this together. The offensive line won the scrimmage. That's massive. A quarterback who was better and more consistent and started to separate as things went along, and young skill players that are starting to produce in situational football. So that's good. We know it's going to be a run-first outfit. They're going to be trying to protect the football, that's for sure. Protect the quarterback, that's for sure. But we know that Philo has just one career college start and sat behind Haynes King, and Haynes King went on to finish in the top 10 in the Heisman voting. So I'll be curious to see how Philo handles it, but I have a lot of reason to believe that he's going to be pretty good. If you listen to people that have watched him closely, said that he's going to be a playmaker. He can do some special things with the football. So we'll see exactly where he ends up. And he finished as one of the all-time passing leaders in the state of Georgia. He broke a school record held by Trevor Lawrence. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be throwing for 400 a game on Saturdays, but sounds like he can play. And sounds like if the offensive line in front of him plays really, really well, then this group could actually overachieve, and that's what we're forecasting. We are obviously much higher on Florida than most of the national media. We like the Gators, and we think they have a chance to be very dangerous this season. Moving on to the LSU Tigers. And the first thing you're hearing out of Baton Rouge is that Sam Leavitt did not look great early in the second scrimmage, and then boom, a switch flipped, and he was off the charts at that point. In the first couple series, they had just one completion, apparently. That was to Trey Green. But it was the third series, that's when everything got going. Finds Green, finds Winston Watkins, then threaded one into traffic to Green again. They went about 50 yards in 3 snaps. Some people are saying he made some amazing throws and that we know he's a great runner, which is exactly what made him one of the highest ranked recruits in the portal last year. That's the first real look anyone's had of Sam Leavitt in a live setting in over a year. Second thing that you're hearing about was a position that I thought might have been of weakness. I was not super bullish on the LSU running back room. Well, it sounds like they're trending in the right direction. I mean, Charlie Weiss Jr. called it before it happened. He said he liked the balance that they had in the room. They have a bigger back in Dylan Jones. They have some home run hitting ability. Caden Durham goes for 75 and a touchdown, broke another long one when he was with the ones. Harlem Berry didn't miss a little bit of time, but sounds like he's had some great moments as well. Stacey Gage took some reps and made something with them as well. So for a team that finished dead last in the SEC in rushing last year, to have 4 backs take turns breaking long runs in Tiger Stadium is really encouraging. And that should be a breath of fresh air for LSU camp. Now, 2 weeks into fall camp, and Lane Kiffin has talked about the depth along the defensive line. In week 3, he talked about the depth along the offensive line, said that the run blocking right now is a little ahead of the pass blocking. And if you look at where things are, that's something worth watching. He also said that the best player on the team might be Trey Green. Had some great grabs. There maybe is a bit of inconsistency from time to time. Maybe he'll drop it every once in a while. But nobody in the building is going to be worried about Trey Green because he's got a chance to be a big-time playmaker in this offense. So what does this mean? All right. The offense is going to be explosive. There might be moments here in year 1 under Lane Kiffin where they have some inconsistencies, and that might show up, right? You got a quarterback that maybe the first couple series weren't great, and then boom, they can hit you from 75 yards and go the distance. You got a tight end who's one of the biggest mismatches of the sport. You have a group that maybe is a work in progress from a pass protection standpoint, but there's a lot of reason to believe that the hype surrounding LSU is real. And if you look at what Blake Baker's done defensively and how they've done a great job on the core of that defense, you got to feel pretty excited about it. So, yes, while the players are maybe getting used to a new offense, we know exactly what Charlie Weiss Jr., we know what Lane Kiffin are going to do. Ole Miss led the SEC in total offense last year, averaging about 500 yards a game. LSU, on the other side, they did not score more than 25 points last year against an FBS opponent. So Clemson comes to Tiger Stadium on September 5th, and now we're going to find out exactly where LSU is in what should be this exciting season for the Bayou Bengals. The USC Trojans, and people are starting to watch practice, which was quiet. They wouldn't let people in practice there for a while, but you're hearing a lot of good buzz coming out of Southern California. Visiting coaches that have gone and seen LSU and Texas and Alabama and Ohio State, they stood there at USC practice and said, man, they are bigger in the trenches than they've been in quite some time. Like, they're bigger than some of the best teams in the sport. Then Chris Peterson, he goes on Colin Cowherd's show. He says he watched practice. He said, man, they look different. The talent looks different. He said it even reminds him a little bit of SC back in the day, even around Pete Carroll's era, and that the offensive and defensive lines are getting back to being big dudes. And we've seen this before, right? But two sets of trained eyes independently acknowledging the same thing is really encouraging. And look, we know that they've lost a guy or two on each side of the line. Like Keelon O'Connor, their center, he's out for the year. Sounded like he was going to be the line's general, so hated that he won't be available. You have to move some things around. But it's on the other side where Jakeem Stewart's expected to miss the first couple weeks because of a foot injury that is lingering from last year. So I think that we need to watch these guys closely and really hate that Stewart won't be available. But it sounds like they actually have the depth this year to potentially overcome that, where in the past you lose a guy up front, SC just doesn't have the dudes to be able to get back on track and not have a significant drop-off. Now, it sounds like some of the guys that are coming out and are making some plays, for example, Floyd Boucard, who's up to 315 pounds. He's one of the better defenders and only played 170 some odd snaps last year. But it sounds like he's a guy that's going to be pretty dang productive on the interior of that defense when it comes to the pass rush. Now, how good will he be against the run? We'll find out, right? But he's not the youngest guy anymore. Sounds like he's stepping up his game. So here's the three things that I'm taking away right now from SC's camp. Look, we know the quarterback's going to be good. I'm never going to be concerned about Lincoln Riley scoring points or manufacturing passing attack, regardless of what they lost at wide receiver. I know the running back's going to be good. I think the offensive line, even in spite of losing O'Connor, they're going to be just fine. The defense has always been the question. It's always been the question. But when you have two guys that have no connection to SC whatsoever, saying that SC's advantage is size in the trenches, that's significant. That is significant. And they spent all offseason saying that this is the deepest roster that Lincoln Riley's had in Los Angeles. You got a bunch of starters back. You got one of the top recruiting classes. You got Gary Patterson running the defense. You got Jaden Mayava back after an amazing year last year. So if the depth is as real as they say it is, then we got a legitimate playoff contender. If not, then we'll find out pretty quickly, right? We'll find out very quickly because they play week 0. We'll get to watch them this weekend, and we are looking forward to it. We will break them down a little later in the week. The North Carolina Tar Heels, first thing you hear is Billy Edwards. He is the starting quarterback. And Bill Belichick picked him for one of the least glamorous reasons, right? They named him the starting quarterback last week, transfer from Wisconsin. He's been around for quite a while. He's going to start over Miles O'Neill. And here's how Belichick explained it. He said that he's been more consistent right now. He has more experience, and that showed up over the long haul of this quarterback competition. Now, the sample size is kind of the detail that I love. All the quarterbacks between spring, summer, and training camp took a combined 2,000 snaps. 2,000 snaps. And said that the decision was not based on one play or one series, one touchdown or one interception. It was the whole composite, and Edwards came out ahead. He told everybody that the decision wouldn't necessarily be about making big plays. It's about avoiding the big mistake. And on the field, that's significant, right? And that there's a clear difference between the arm strength that Edwards might have versus O'Neal. O'Neal's got a bigger arm, but O'Neal might hold the ball a little longer, right? So that's going to be something worth watching. Does the experience of Edwards pay dividends early in the season? The other thing I'm hearing about is Bobby Petrino said they got to run the football. If they want to win, they have to run the football. And so far, it sounds like the run game is answering. Now, the depth in the backfield has stood out as potentially a strength of the entire offense. Like Benjamin Hills can take a fair share of the reps in team periods, but they can go 2 or 3 deep at running back with Damon June and Jalen McGill. And the rushing attack, they popped sporadically throughout those games. That's big. Because if you look at where they're going to be, running the ball, shrinking the game, playing good defense, and of course improving on what should be a much better offense, they might be trending in the right direction. And sounds like they're going to be a little young in a few places. It sounds like on offense, you're going to have several freshmen that could step in and potentially help. On defense, though, haven't been a lot of young guys just yet. But maybe they're going to have to start forcing their way onto the field at some point here very soon. So North Carolina's margin for error is very, very slim. If you look at last year's math, they averaged less than 5 yards of play. Their opponents averaged less than 5 yards of play. Is kind of identical. And UNC got outgained by 48 yards a game anyways, right? Because the other team ran 10 more plays every week. So over the season, that's 117 more snaps. That's 51 more first downs. That's 8 more red zone trips and 12 more offensive touchdowns from the opponent. So in a league where 40+% of the games over the last 5 years were decided by one score, and last year they went 1-3 in one-score games. They lost close to Cal, Virginia, and Duke. Well, none of those need elite offense to flip. You just need to avoid the critical mistake. And the quarterback was picked specifically for making the right play. Not necessarily the big play, but the right play. And the coordinator, Bobby Petrino, who is very experienced, he is going to run the rock. You know he's going to run the rock an awful lot, and we'll find out just how much he can run the rock on Saturday when they take on TCU. We'll keep it in the ACC and talk a little bit about the Florida State Seminoles. And what you're hearing is that the defense won the final scrimmage, which if the defense won the day, that's a real data point. Why does that matter? Well, because this offense last year, you might not know it, they were 6th in college football last year as far as yards per game. 6th. They had over 470 yards a game offensively, and they went 5-7, right? Well, we know Tony White's defense, a little different structure, and it's going to adjust a little bit. It sounds like you have a couple of guys that are popping that are the Sear twins, for example. They've been the headliners so far, Mandrell and Darrell. Those two guys, Mandrell on the inside, Darrell on the outside. Sounds like those guys have been really, really solid. Sounds like Jabril Rawls has been one of the better corners on the roster. Sounds like they've created multiple turnovers throughout fall camp. So outside of that, man, this is big. There's a lot of unproven unknowns about this defense. But if they're holding in check an offense that might be pretty explosive, that's really good news. It also sounds like the running back room is a very crowded group, and that's a really good thing in the ACC. Look, we know Chroma is up to 225 pounds, said he's been exceptional throughout fall camp, said feel his growth in a big way. Sam Singleton has popped several explosive plays as well, and then the transfer from Texas, Quintravian Wisner, did miss a couple scrimmages, but he'll be back healthy, and we know what we're getting from him. So you got 3 guys that could be really, really helpful. And we've seen with Norvell now back calling the plays, you could be a heavy 2 tight end, 2 running back offense that's built to win on the ground, especially with the mobility that you have at quarterback with Ashton Daniels. Look, the line from a lot of new, right? A lot of transfers along that offensive line, but sounds like the run game's been pretty solid because they led the ACC in total offense last year. 33 points a game. They had their best rushing season since '95, and yet went 5-7. So that's going to be important. Like they're also going to have to learn how to win on the road, right? They haven't played very well on the road in quite some time. If you look at last year, they had a bunch of 1-possession games that did not go their way. So the yardage wasn't necessarily the problem, but they got to close, right? So the defense that's winning the scrimmage, a backfield that's really deep, can potentially shorten the game. The offensive line is maybe built from scratch, but they're encouraged by what they've seen so far. And that's 3 ingredients to closing out some of those close ones that they had to deal with last year, right? So Mike Norvell, he took back the play calling. He gave it up last year. Gus Malzahn was calling it. Malzahn then retired. Now Norvell's calling it as well. That's going to be very interesting. I am very encouraged to know that Mike Norvell, who I think is one of the best play callers in the sport, he's now back in charge. So as a program that has fallen on some hard times, but if you look at where things are going, man, they have plenty of opportunities. I mean, it starts on Monday night, Labor Day Monday, with SMU at their place. So we're going to know everything we need to know about Florida State here at some point very, very soon. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Keep it locked in. Now is time. Now is the time where you need to lock in. You got to listen to all the episodes because we're going to build on them. We got to give you our playoff projections a little later in the week. We're going to do our Week 0 preview a little later in the week as well. So now it's time. It's time to start locking in. We'll keep you updated with Camp Confidential too. Several battles that are still going on. Hopefully they'll be decided here in the next couple days. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, and intern Charlie, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.